Welcome back to the channel, everyone. My name is Yeagerist, and today we're going to be talking about the volatile history of Paradis and the spirit of both the Civic Corps and Yeagerists. Now, this video is just supposed to be informational. I'm not trying to get you to think a certain way or anything like that. It's like my other videos, just purely informational, making things more clear and really diving into these topics of what is the Civic Corps. This is mainly a Civic Corps video, but it will cover a lot of things. All right, so let's start off actually with the formation of the Civic Corps. The Civic Corps, now let's start off with the organization of Paradis. Now, Paradis is a heavily militarized nation, consistently using child soldiers, as well as having the military handle domestic policing duties. It's important to note, however, that Paradis has a population of about 1 million people, which is about the size of Houston. So, if you think about it that way, that's rather small. Now, since Paradis has only 1 million people, there really is no armed forces to protect Paradis from outside invaders. We do have armed forces, but it's not to protect them from outside invaders. And you may be thinking, what is the Civic Corps? Isn't the Civic Corps supposed to be protecting them from outside invaders? Actually, no. This is something that people need to be cleared up. So the Civic Corps actually is not anything that goes out and protects and defends Paradis. What do they do? The Civic Corps does, and this is made very explicit in episode 1. The Civic Corps does. They simply go out to survey land. They go out to survey land and recapture the lands for humanity's benefit. And the other thing that I think needs to be said about the Civic Corps is that the Civic Corps is a very selfless organization, and it's one of those organizations that would be an international organization. That's what I think. If it was in the real world, if circumstances were different, the Civic Corps would be an international organization. What would they do? I don't exactly know. Maybe they go into volcanoes, probably go deep diving into sea, or they probably go up into space. That is the spirit of the Civic Corps. They go out and they survey land for the good of humanity. For the good of humanity, remember. Now, the military police, again, handles domestic policing duties. The garrison protects the walls and maintains the walls. So their job is the walls. The walls need all this stuff. As I said, maintenance, protection, upkeep, just maintenance, stuff like that. So Now, we already talked about the garrison and military police, and so these are under the command of their each respective commanders. So the commander of the Civic Corps, the commander of the military police, and the commander of the garrison. Which is funny, I don't think we actually got a commander of the garrison ever. Maybe we did. That old fat guy. I don't know. I'll have to look into that. But anyway, that's how it's structured. And above those people is what is titled the commander-in-chief in the books. You call him the commander-in-chief. Of the premier. However, he is not actually the commander-in-chief as you and I would say is the commander-in-chief. That person is actually the monarch, since Paradis is a monarchy. That person is the monarch, and that person appoints exactly. We know this because of the Fuel Titan arc. Or was it the train arc? Which arc was it? The arc where Eren goes to court, basically. And so we get lines of dialogue that say that the premier is under the authority of the king, which means that the king, or the monarch, is actually the commander-in-chief of the Eldian Armed Forces, which does not have an expeditionary force to protect. They have an expeditionary force, quote-unquote, to survey land and reclaim land from the Titans for the good of humanity. Now, as the situation develops, when the warriors break down the wall, the Civic Corps mission actually changes. And by the way, for purposes of this video, we will not be using official sources for this. We will be going off of de facto because, as I said, the situation gets very volatile, and so we will have to go based off of de facto, not what is actually said. However, this will be the only time we will get lines of dialogue confirming what I am saying. Armin says explicitly the Civic Corps mission changes. So the Civic Corps changes this mission from surveying and reclaiming land to regaining the land simply from Wall Moria. That's what they do. Just regain Wall Moria. That's their mission. Notice the fluidity of these things. So they go from surveying land and reclaiming, so they do both survey and reclaim, to just getting back from Walmart, just reclaiming the lands from Walmart. They do this because they have to launch out. They have to launch out from Walmart now, but also because they're the best suited for the job. They didn't put the Garrison on, they put the Circle on it because they're the best suited for the job. They have all the combat experience and the leadership required to go back and take back Walmart. Now, when they take back Walmart and they reach the end of the island ends shortly after they reclaim Walmart. After they eliminate all the Titans, now their duties change up a bit because when they get to the basement in Walmart after they reclaim it, they discover that there's actually these things called the nations, and nations wage war with each other and are prone to take advantage of each other. And so, how this new world order is, since there's not a million people, but is it 1 billion, 2 billion people in the world? Now it's all segregated into nations, and now those nations have arbitrary differences, and now they're fighting against each other. So all these countries have now designated and appointed expeditionary armed forces to defend them from outside attackers. And so Paradis has no formal military, so the Silver Corps becomes a de facto military. Again, why? They seize the anti-personnel gear from the military police, which was made to fight humans, and they have the most combat experience. And so then the role changes again to basically become the Paradis army. Now, their first act as the Paradisian army is to pick off the boats coming from Marley to come survey the island or keep tabs on the island, whatever. So Aaron and the Silver Corps pick off those boats. That's the first act that they do. Now, the next act they do is they invade Liberio. Now, for this next portion, it's important to note that, as I said previously, the commander of the Silver Corps is a government official. So he acts on behalf of the government, and he is the government. So, if you do something that is contrary to the Silver Corps, or that disobeys the Silver Corps, you are now acting either insubordinate or you're treacherous. Right? Those are the only two options because you're dealing with a government official now. So, Aaron Yeager, for manipulating the Silver Corps into getting him in Liberio, is then tossed into prison. Now, this small, at first, rebel faction, the Yeagerists, are demanding his release because he is seen as the savior of Eldia. Now, as this is going on, Hange, a government official, again, doesn't reveal any information, keeps him locked up, yada, yada, and then the Yeagerists blow up Zackley. Now, this Zackley, who's the commander-in-chief, more appropriately named the premier, he's the premier, and he's in charge of all three branches of the military. The Silver Corps, which is now basically their army, the garrison, which really is kind of in an identity crisis, and of course, military police, which handles policing duties. He is killed. Well, actually, it's actually important to note that he's in charge of policing duties because the police would be dealing somewhat with the judiciary process of Aaron Yeager, as well as him being overseeing court-martials, Zackley being overseeing court-martials. And so Zackley is assassinated by this rebel organization, the Yeagerist. Now, this is something that's very important to note. As I said beforehand, he's not the true commander-in-chief, as we would describe it today. Like, again, the commander-in-chief of the American Armed Forces is the president, not the Secretary of Defense, who is under the authority of the president. So Zackley is gone, and Historia is the queen at this point. Now, from retroactively looking back, with 130, we know Historia is a Yeagerist, right? Zackley is dead. So now there's sort of a question of, well, what's really going on? Who's really in charge? Because if Zackley is dead and Historia, the second highest, the highest authority in the island, is also a Yeagerist and also sanctions these actions. We know this because Aaron Yeager went to her. Well, Hange's a government official. Now what is going on? Someone is being treacherous here. Someone is betraying the island at this point, or someone is betraying the country, the queen. I mean, sorry, someone's betraying a government official. That's what I mean. Clear it up. So either someone's betraying the island or someone's betraying a government official. This again is very volatile, moves very quickly. Now later on, the Yeagerists gather more and more people. And then the wine plan happens, where Hixus and Doc and everyone else is all killed, except for Hange. Hange survives because she was in prison, so she didn't need to be taken to the wine. But everyone else is gone. At this moment, I would say, personally, this is my personal belief, I would say the Yeagers are the de facto rulers of the country. Now, why do I say this? I say this because, again, Historia, the highest authority in the land, is a Yeagerist. All these actions are sanctioned by her, as well as the fact that I think we all can agree that Aaron is the de facto second in command, at least the de facto second in command. You could say Floch is the general. You could say that. Again, we're all using these very unordained terms because nothing's really been fully settled and justice hasn't fully settled yet. And the other thing we have to note is that whether you are a traitor or whether you are a rebel depends on whether or not you win a war. For example, the Confederate States of America never existed. That was not a real thing. It wasn't a thing. It wasn't legit. It wasn't anything. That was just a group of rebel states that rebelled against the federal government authority and were put down. That's what it was. There aren't two presidents. There aren't two countries here. It was always just the United States of America and the disobedient South. That's all that was. However, going further back, the United States of America, as she exists today, well, obviously does exist. However, if after the Declaration of Independence was signed and we lost the war, we would not have ever been a country. You see that? We would have not have ever been a country. We would have just been simply a group of rebels who was put down. Or traitors that were put down. And inversely, if the Confederate States of America indeed won the war, the Civil War, they would have always been a country since the day that they succeeded. You see how this works? So whether or not you are a country, again, the whole debate of what is a country, or sorry, I should probably say sovereign state to be more specific. It depends on what a sovereign state is kind of, I would say, controversial. No one really knows yet. If you ask how many countries are there, you would get different answers. But most solidly, I think we can all agree on is that's how that would work. Everyone would agree. In most cases, this is how it would work. It would depend that whether you were always a country or not would depend on whether or not you won the war. So this is why it's good that this video is being made now and not during the middle of the whole thing. Now, looking back retroactively, since I read 139, I can now color all of this as with the 2020 vision. So we know the Yeagerist eventually, again, do become the legitimate Eldian armed forces as their banner is waved at the end, and the soldiers wear their elbow on them. And Historia proudly oversees all of this. So we know the Yeagers become the legit armed forces of Paradis. But when did the Survey Corps switch from being the armed forces of Paradis to the Yeagers being the armed forces of Paradis? Because remember, when they picked off the boats when they invaded Liberio, they had the Survey Corps elbow and the Survey Corps commander leading this charge, and they were acting as the armed forces of Paradis, but at a certain point, that did not happen. So the question is, when did this happen? And I'd say there's 3 points where this could have happened. And I think only 2 legit points. And of course, I have 1 point. This is not my middle finger, by the way. And I think there's 1 point. So the first point is when Zach gets assassinated. At that point, one could sort of make the argument, this is when the Yeagers took over. This is when the Yeagers became the legit country's
armed forces.
At the time is when I said, when the leaders of the military, Dot, Pixis, and Niall Doc, are essentially assassinated. And most importantly, Zeke is let free, because remember, the whole Yeager's thing, the Yeager's goal was to get Aaron with Zeke. So when Zeke is freed, and Aaron is freed, and the military is all turned to wine, and Hange, a government official, mind you, is locked up. Or was she out of prison when that happened? Well, she was already locked up. So in my mind, it's kind of like the same thing. Like they're exerting their authority. They're delegitimizing her. Let's put it that way. Sorry, I'm a bit rusty. I don't have the Dwarf Paradis box set yet. Now, at that point, once the scream happened, everyone was turned into Titans. I believe this was battle after Peak did her little thing, and they all that whole battle. I don't know the name for that, but that whole situation. Now, the third option is when it happens shortly after, which is when all these events happen pretty quickly, but which is when the rumbling started. Now, at that point, I think that's the final cutoff. After that point, they're definitely the Yeagerists are definitely the legitimate country's armed forces, and I say that because this is not up for debate. I really don't want you Alliance fans in my comment section saying all sorts of weird stuff like you always do. Anything I criticize or saying anything that can be construed as negative towards your position. This is not up for debate. But when after the rumbling started, the Survey Corps started to betray the island's own interests. They betrayed them, literally betrayed the island. It's not up for debate. It's there. They said they did. Everyone said they did. So I don't want to hear anything in my comments. Okay. So at that point, I would say, well, that's when they would renounce their legitimacy of being the island's expeditionary force. And this is why I mentioned the international thing back in the beginning, because were they ever really Paradis's soldiers to begin with, or were they soldiers to the world provided by Paradis? What do I mean by that? It's like the UN peacekeepers. The UN peacekeepers as an example, right? The UN does not have its own military, right? Sorry, their own soldiers. They don't have their own soldiers. Countries have to provide soldiers to them. The UN is not a sovereign state. It is an international organization. So the soldiers must be provided from other countries' armed forces. So what I am saying is perhaps maybe we're looking at this whole thing wrong. Perhaps they were simply the world soldiers that were provided by Paradis. And this would explain the whole split between the Yeagerists and the Survey Corps. Because, on the one hand, you're a Paradisian. You're a Paradisian national. You want the best for your country. But on the other hand, you're committed to this international cause, which it would be the cause of humanity. As we see when they meant to talk about seeing people that they don't know, and fighting for humanity, all other stuff. And when I say fighting for humanity, I mean post-time skip. Okay, so maybe, perhaps, this entire time they were really just the Survey Corps soldiers provided by Paradis. The only reason I didn't say that was definitive is because of, again, the Liberia raid that showed a clear distinction of a country acting to protect their own interest against another country. So that would lead me to believe that perhaps that wasn't exactly what the Survey Corps was. But if you think about it, it does bring up for an interesting dynamic, because the Yeagerist went along with the Paradisian side of them, and the Alliance simply went along with the international or humanitarian side of them. I don't know, something to think about. So, anyway, the rumbling happens. They betray the island. They then, of course, completely delegitimized, hook up with the warriors from Marley, who also are not warriors of Marley anymore, because they're now working with the Paradisians, Island Devils, yada yada yada. And before you say anything, oh, Beluga, they're still helping Marley. They're really really not. Most of Marley's already champion at that point. They're really doing it for, again, people whose names they don't know, for the rest of the world. So they hook up with the Marley generals and the Marley warriors to then go on to fight the rumbling. Now, again, the reason I bring this up is because this task force, which is now, I guess, task force is the best way to call it, is now operating outside of what I would say is sanctioned duties. Okay, so now you can either describe this as a civil war, sort of, because you have Paradisians killing Paradisians. I think it's inappropriate to define it as a civil war. I think this is more of just a rogue paramilitary unit that is fighting the Eldian armed forces. So at this point, the Alliance, in which should be the traitors to Eldia, is now killing the Paradisian armed forces, the Eldian armed forces, and then to go then stop the rumbling. So, and then of course, they stop the rumbling, and then since this is why Historia is the best possible option. You should also watch my video on that, by the way. And since, of course, Historia is the ruler and has connections with the people in the 104th Cadet Corps, she then guarantees safety for these for the Alliance So they're able to come back to the island without fear of reprisal to a strong army and leader. And at this point, the Silver Corps has been completely dissolved. Mikasa obviously did not do any more expenditures after this. She married John. Armin did. We don't know what Armin did. The reason why I say it's dissolved is because it left open the possibility that they may do space exploration, sea exploration, yada yada yada. But it would appear as though the people who would do these projects are all retired. So that's why I say it's dissolved. So the Silver Corps has been completely dissolved, but they did do the greatest act for humanity, which was stopping the rumbling. So I guess it worked out well for both them and the Yeagerists after all, since the Yeagerists did end up winning and the Silver Corps ended up winning, sort of. So there you go. Hope you found the video enjoyable. Hope you found it interesting. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.